Hey, we're back just checking to see if the audio fixed. Apologize. We were sharing some slides, and as soon as we did that, the audio just went out. So, okay, so you can hear it, Joyce. Hopefully we'll get the other ones to come right back. If we are better here. I'm Carrie Rogers Whitehead and talking about AI and ethics. Where's the line? And I use that word, where's the line, because sometimes this is fuzzy. It's fuzzy in legal ways. It's fuzzy in guidelines and policies. We're all kind of figuring out what this looks like, but it's also fuzzy in terms of maybe we haven't thought about where our own personal line is. So as we talk about AI, we're going to be exploring our own personal ethics. We're going to be debating. There are no right or wrong answers here. It's just kind of we're expressing our thoughts so we can have that self-reflection period where we can feel where is our line. So feel free to go introduce yourself. We have a moderator in the chat. We will be sharing some links in the chat, and I will be showing you some places where you can add your thoughts in a online debate. There. On my line, I've been kind of figuring this out a lot because I write a lot. I have the 8th book out next year, and that was the first book I've ever written that I haven't, ChatGPT was never an option. So that was Technology for Littles, and all these other books, it was like I didn't have a choice. It was just, this is how I have to do it. ChatGPT didn't exist. There were no options there. And all of a sudden I was confronted in this writing of the book of where is my line in terms of generative AI? What do I feel comfortable with using? What do I not feel comfortable with using? And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. Maybe some of you are writers and creators and trying to figure out like what that looks like for you. But for me, I decided that I was okay with citations using generative AI, but I felt uncomfortable with something else. But I had some weird feelings about it because maybe I am holding myself back. Maybe I am not taking advantage of the situation. Why do I feel uncomfortable about using that for my own writing? So I'm still kind of thinking and exploring what that means to me. But for that particular book, I decided I had a line. I had a line on how I would use it. So when you're creating or making something, I don't know if anyone has something that they've been using generative AI for, or maybe a hobby that's changed because of AI, or career work that's changed with AI. Feel free to share. But this is something we're all kind of having to be faced with because it was never an option before determining that line. So we're going to be looking at some ethical questions. Now, I originally did this in person with Mentimeter, but I've been trying out a new, I'm going to put a link in here, a new app called Kialu, and it's like set up for debate. So I just made a free account. I put up some thesis statements where you can add on there. So that's just kind of my account, but you can just go to Kialu.edu. If you do debate, if you have some of these discussions in your class, it's a way to kind of see what everyone is talking about. And I apologize, I was going to share my screen, but we had audio issues earlier. So we'll be sharing some links, and I'll be kind of going back and forth on my end to see your comments and your thoughts. But I did this through Mentimeter before to kind of poll, but I kind of want to have a richer, deeper discussion through the app as well. And I'll be kind of reading things. It's all going to be anonymous. I'm not going to be necessarily reading anyone's name unless anyone wants to speak up with their opinion. But we are going to be engaging in a series of increasingly difficult ethical questions to help you think about what your line is. And I'm going to show you some poll results through Mentimeter of other educators who have gone through this ethical journey. So we're going to start with one that is affecting us. I just mentioned it's affecting me with my writing. Is on like creation. Who owns what? What is creativity? What does copyright look like? But there's a whole bunch in there. Feel free to add if something hits you. These are just a few I threw out there. But a big one I think to ask is, what is creativity and what does it mean to be a human? Because we've often said creativity is the domain of humans, right? But if AI can do music and art and these other kind of things, what does that mean? I was reading a story by the Go Master. I don't know if you're familiar. You've got chess and ramp that up by times 1,000, and you've got Go, a very complicated game with the black and white circles that you move around on a dice, on a flat board, I mean. And the Go champion of the world, he's been a champion for years and years, lost in 2016 to an AI. And it actually pushed him to quit chess. And he goes around and does AI lectures a lot of the time. And it made him question. He felt like Go, the game, was kind of an art, and it made him question everything. So that is some of that questioning that we might be going through. I should find that article link, but and share it with you. It's a fascinating kind of journey that he's been going on of where the line after he was beaten quite soundly by the AI in the game of what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be creative? And does something we define as an art, maybe not, what does art mean in that regard? So it's pushed us to have these ethical concerns, and one case study I'll mention as we go into our first ethical question around ownership and human authorship. This is a 2D piece that was denied copyright. It's created through AI with Midjourney, and it won the 2022 Colorado State Fair, and it filed for copyright and had 624 prompts. That's actually a lot of prompts there to edit. And they were some new content that was added, but it was denied once first, and then it was denied again even after the edits. So the Copyright Office is still figuring out what does that look like. And on all those prompts and even some original art within it did not reach that threshold of human authorship. If you ever want to, the Copyright Office has an AI page that it puts updates and things that they have out there. But what is the line? I think they're still figuring out what the line is, but it's like when you know it, when you see it. And I want to know where it is for you. So Joyce, if you want to put in a link, and we'll make sure and let us know if you have any problems accessing this on our first ethical question around human authorship. So where is the line? So that this term de minimis amount. So this is the question that you'll have, and I'll show you some poll results in a second from some of the other educators. But if you click on that discussion topic 1, it'll take you to a page, and I apologize as the sharing wasn't working. I can't show it as well, that you can enter and you can add your comments. So my question is, like, if you want to get a copyright, should it at least be half made by a human? Should it be more? Should it be, where is that line? Was 624 edits on the AI creating art piece over here not enough? Would have been okay if it was 800 prompts? Do we have a line on how many prompts it is? How much of human creation versus AI is allowed? So you'll go on this and you'll see kind of a little thing where you can kind of click on the little buttons that you can add some pros and cons. So, some thoughts of like, 100%. And as I said, there's not a right or wrong here. You can see kind of what some other people should be writing. Copyright should be future ready. Yeah, like how does, we have changed copyright law. Of course, Disney helped change copyright law. We've done it before. We can do it again to kind of prepare for some of this. Feel free also if you want to put something in the chat too, but looking at the page, I'm just seeing a few things as well. I think that people can edit and build off what they learned via AI. So maybe at least half. I don't know. Maybe 0. Maybe for some people that would be the acceptable line amount of human authorship. So you'll click that link. Let us know if you're having any technical issues. Looking at the discussion topic as we kind of figure out what is your line around AI content in these creative works, and that leads to a larger question I encourage you to have with your students of what is creativity, what is art, and can art only be done by humans? Is that just a human thing? Mentions citing the sources. It does get complicated. And all artists often build off each other, right? So you have the Impressionists and then the Realists, and they have all these painters that like the styles evolved over time as they found other people's pieces of art. So we kind of like in our own ways take prompts and take others' creations to build on our own art creations, but we don't consider that not your art, even if you maybe based it on something. I was in New York City just the other week. Andy Warhol, Campbell's Soup. You've seen that famous artwork. He didn't make the Campbell Soup label. He just put it in an artwork. So what is human creation, and what did he take from someone else here? So feel free to keep adding in that and thinking about that question of human creation. This is something lawyers are trying to figure out as well too. And your students want to think about it too. And your own, and if you have an assignment, what are you going to put some rules in the assignment of what's allowed and what's not allowed? And what would that percentage be and why? And how would you justify it there? So that's our first little try with Kialu. And we're going to keep diving into this topic on our next discussion question. So I'll show you a little bit if this, hopefully this will work. Okay. Nope. Yeah. On plagiarism. So that relates to plagiarism. What is plagiarism? What is it? What does that look like? And where's the line on, okay, I need to summarize something. I need to cite something. How do I cite it? What do I cite? What does that look like? So this is from a Writing and Education Week that they found, this is over, it was 2023 and when ChatGPT was available, that at least 11% of assignments that are run through its tool had at least 20% of AI in it. Now that might have increased since then, since this article came out. I think it came out in the spring. So where is the line of plagiarism? Because even if you write your own thing, if you're citing yourself, that could be plagiarism. If there's still some fuzzy areas on some certain times of policies and then what that looks like in schools and how you define it. So that's first the definition of how we're going to define plagiarism. But what is enough? What is too much? 1%, 3%? So you're going to see this put in the discussion topic 2, as we're going to kind of define and look at what plagiarism maybe is. And again, I appreciate someone mentioned, I'm looking at your other debate, and you can access this link. It'll just be available for a while. So if you want to go back and you can add to things. Yeah, he did play. Maybe Andy Warhol plagiarized as well too. I mean, I guess it was interesting at the museum. People were really gathered around all the Andy Warhol stuff, and I was like, I wasn't as impressed. So let's look at the plagiarism debate, and you'll see the question, which is, let's say your school uses a plagiarism detector. It returns a percentage of presumed plagiarism. What percentage is acceptable? So discussion topic 2 that Joyce just put in there, feel free to click on it and put your thoughts in. Now, maybe acceptable is not the best word. Maybe allowed or encouraged could be another word. However you want to put it. Is there a line that you have? And I've used Turnitin myself, running through a learning management system with college students, and I've gotten a wide range of things, and I sometimes get confused on what it spits out. Like, what does that even mean? And it doesn't always define it very well for me. So I'm still struggling with that line. And where's the line that I might report it or say something? So anything under 10%, there's a line there. Someone's thought about it as well. A zero tolerance rule. See, I get that, but it's like, I guess it depends on how you define plagiarism with what that looks like, right? How broad of a definition is that? So I know this is great. So some other thoughts if you want to put in your line on that discussion of our ethics around plagiarism here. Okay, this is from the Mentimeter when I did with some schools earlier. This was that question. I had a few that had nothing was allowed, nothing was acceptable, but I want to know your line. Yeah, parents should have this conversation too. That's a good point. And there's an issue of learning about citations. How do you do a citation? What does a citation mean? How do you find the sources? This is a media literacy question as well. I've dealt with this a lot with my college students. Is they'll basically like rewrite the quote or summarize something but not give credit, but they literally think that you have to quote the exact quote, but you don't have to cite it if you summarize it. And so I think there's some confusion, and they're missing. These are college students, either 20 even 30-year-olds who didn't really understand that citations weren't just exact quotes. So there's an education piece in all of this as well, and I would say for parents too. So we've got some lines here. Feel free to put some of your thoughts out, and as I said, it's all anonymous, and you can go back and click on this link and get your thoughts of where that line is on plagiarism. But I kind of want to move on to some other some other broader topics related to AI. I said in the beginning that this presentation was going to get a little less comfortable as we go through. So let's get a little uncomfortable with some questions around what we view as an acceptable amount of risk. So it is hard sometimes to have that zero tolerance policy. There's exceptions to exceptions, and people are complicated, and how you define plagiarism or the rule can vary. So we kind of as a society recognize that zero is sometimes difficult. Maybe that's the goal, but we can't get there. So we accept a certain amount of risk. We take risk with what we eat and drink. And every time we get in a car or an airplane or whatever, we recognize that it's never completely, like, you can never do something without some level of risk. But what is the acceptable level of risk with AI? We seem to accept more risk with humans because humans are fallible, but we have different feelings on what risk we can take with AI. So I want you to think about that. In an example, oh, sorry. Let me pause real quick. That next link is not working. I'm going to go make sure that it's, I'll pull that up for you as well, as we talked about acceptable risk here. So let's try this link again, see if that one works. But I want to share a real life example. The FDA has a huge giant book of laws and rules around our canned foods, our packaged foods. And the FDA recognizes that you can't necessarily make something without an acceptable risk of something going in it. We don't make these things in a vacuum of space with like nothing. So for example, the FDA allows a certain amount of insect parts in ground cinnamon, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. If you want to dive in, there's like mouse hairs, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. And we have decided, well, we can't get rid of all the mouse hairs, but we can accept this amount. I have no idea how the FDA came up with this number of 450 grams, but that is the rule. That is what a manufacturer has to do. So I want you to think about this concept of acceptable risk first in this example, and then we're going to broaden it more to AI. Okay, I'm going to need to adjust the permissions on that really quick. I apologize that I couldn't share my screen or my audio went out, so I had to pick one. So I am going to make sure that sharing link is working, and then I'm going to put it right back in the box. Let's see if this one, let me know everyone if this one will work here. Okay. As a question I have for all of you is how you feel about this. How many insect parts are acceptable? Or you can even broaden it. How much do you think, how many like parts in any kind of food product is acceptable? What does that look like? So does that link work okay? I think I got the permissions fine there. This was the Mentimeter that I had. I had a wide range on this one earlier, but I want to hear from you your level of acceptable risk, and I hope this doesn't ruin cinnamon for you there too. So and then why and how do you feel about this concept of acceptable risk? I mean, we do this. We use the examples of phones. Or cars, but I could use examples of phones. You give someone a kid a phone and you recognize that there's an acceptable risk, but what is that level of risk and what are we able to handle with that? You put a kid on a bike, there's an acceptable risk. We try to mitigate that risk with maybe helmets, but we recognize that there's not a foolproof method for completely keeping that kid safe. And there's not a very good foolproof method for like, sometimes food and manufacturing as well. So we got zero, and I get that. Super disputive. I mean, I guess it depends on that's the 400 is the maximum, if that makes you feel better. So maybe some have zero and some have 399 when they do inspections and stuff. I have no idea how they do those inspections, but there is a giant Bible from the FDA of like how they have rules for all of this. But to me, it's a larger example of what we're okay with and what we're not okay with. So I'll give you a minute there. So yeah, hot dogs with cinnamon. Yeah, I don't know why cinnamon. I guess that's how it's grown. I don't know what a cinnamon plant looks like. So, but yeah, there's also, roaches, mice, poop, rat poop that gets into things as well. So what's an acceptable level of that too? So we didn't ruin it, but I want to get you thinking, and I'm going to move on to the broader piece. Feel free to keep typing on here. People also, we're moving to 0% on this group, but to think about this concept as we talk about AI. What level of acceptable risk are we able to handle? And this is something that policymakers and politicians and a whole bunch of people are talking about. And it's just like the copyright. It's not a very clear consensus of what that looks like, where that line is. So this is just kind of a stat from an investigation of crashes involving autopilot. This is from 2018 to 2023 with these self-driving cars. So they looked at these cars over these 5 years, and there was 956 crashes. Humans do a lot more crashes. But I'd like to hear what you think is the terms of acceptable risk. We have self-driving cars, we have autonomous vehicles, and Joyce, if you want to put in the next one there, this is on acceptable risk part 2 there, and I'm going to pull it up as well. I want to hear what you think. Where's your line? What do you feel comfortable with? How many crashes are acceptable? Okay, it's another permissions issue. I will share, make sure that works okay with you. And I will put it right in here. That one work okay? So see if that link is okay, and tell me what you think is okay with some of these crashes. 0? Just a few. 956 over 5 years is what the National Highway Safety Board found. So we know that they crash less, but they still crash. At what level of crashing is that acceptable? Where is your line? And would you feel comfortable? I've never been in one. I'm curious if anyone's been in this group in one of the self-driving cars and how it felt. There is something that feels like the wheel moving and me not moving it, like this lack of control. But maybe some people feel even more comfortable, like someone else is taking over. We drive with other people all the time, and they're driving, and I don't feel uncomfortable if I'm sitting in the passenger seat. So why do I feel uncomfortable if there was no one in the driver's seat? But how does that make sense? So I need to examine my own feelings on that as well. Why I feel discomfort about what. And that's there's the goal, right? Zero plagiarism, zero this might be the goal, but and zero insect parts in the cinnamon might be the goal, but that's not necessarily realistic. And then how do you define what realistic is? It's difficult as well. So someone mentioned seeing them in California. Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable, but that doesn't make sense if I let people drive for me all the time. And I don't feel uncomfortable about that. So why is this different there? So some good points. What is our level of crashes are acceptable? And I'm not defining crashes exactly as the same way. So maybe your opinion would be different if there was a kid in the car. Is it zero acceptance with the minor? What about the speed that it was going? What about this? Hard to know. I've seen some of them around. I actually thought it was like a cop car one time because it had a big thing on the top. I started driving slower there. But I'll leave that up. We just got a few comments and less than normal. Yeah, we're not doing so great with crashes there, and I'm glad that someone mentioned that it could be an improvement because I'll share with you some more stats around that. So I mentioned just crashes on this first one. And of that 956 crashes that they investigated, 29 were fatal. So maybe we're okay with like a fender bender, but do we feel differently if it was a fatal accident? Now, I'm not giving you all the details of those fatal accidents because maybe it wasn't the self-driving car. Sometimes we don't always know. Maybe there was another car that ran in that the self-driving car was involved in. So how do we feel about that? Sometimes we're kind of funny with humans. there are so many more accidents with cars, but we get more nervous sometimes when like the Boeing, like the, you know, the whole Boeing story of the door flying off. They're under criminal charges right now. That's terrifying, even though that's still inherently safer than a car. So why do we have these? We have some illogical feelings around this topic sometimes too. So there were 29 fatal accidents, and they were studying Tesla because they were kind of ahead on the self-driving car game in some way. So I want to kind of ask you kind of a deeper question. So now we're not just talking about crashes. We're going to talk about fatal crashes. So let's make sure that you can access that link. You want to put that one out there. I think I have that there, and how you feel when the risk comes a little bit more. What's our acceptable risk? Okay, let me make sure that we can share some of these here. That one doesn't work. I'll put it right in here. Oops. Okay. Here's a link for you. You can kind of take a look at it. But does the calculation change? Would I feel differently with the insects parts versus hair versus something else in my food? Do I feel differently about a fender bender versus a fatal crash? Do I feel differently of how many people were involved? All those variables can affect where that line is. So what is acceptable for this? So you can, while rare, people have died, what would be an acceptable level of risk of death? Sometimes what this term is also acceptable risk, I think about medication. So you have a medication and there's like a whole long thing of side effects and things that can happen. And sometimes the side effects are death. So, but you kind of have to take the medication sometimes, just like you have to get in a car sometimes. So we're sometimes forced to take this level of acceptable risk. It's hard to opt out, especially when it involves, you know, our health and our jobs and our livelihood and everything there too. So let's take a little more uncomfortable circumstances. I like that someone said, in my heart of hearts. Yeah, like where's our reason versus our logic? Just like how we react to plane crashes differently than car crashes. We're not necessarily using the logical part of our brain. It's the emotional piece. It's seeing the wreckage. It's seeing the tragedy. It's just like something visceral that we react emotionally different than just something that happens every day. It just seems unnatural with a plane versus a car. What's normalized? What's not? But yeah, rather get a self-driving car than with a drunk driver. Yeah, and we do that all the time. we do it all the time. We have other people take the wheel, and we accept that level of risk there too. So acceptable, I don't know if that's the best word, but as policymakers determine, safety regulations, and as more of these self-driving cars come out on the road, these are some hard questions to answer. Do we have a recall if it reaches a certain line? Do we get rid of things if it reaches a certain line? Do we just say no? I mean, we haven't done that with regular cars. We haven't been like, wow, too many people have died, no more cars. We don't usually go back, but yeah, what is that level of acceptable risk? All of these links should still be up if you want to scroll up and kind of even add a little bit more on there on acceptable risk. So this is a stat from 2022, and I know I can't find a stat that exactly lines up with that 5-year mark. That was 956 crashes over 5 years. Just in 1 year, we had 42,514 in 2022. That I don't know if someone wants to do the math of how the percentage different. If we're going to take like 500 versus 42,000, that's a big difference. So if you know the data, does it help you make that decision better when we can compare it to something? Or does it still feel like viscerally icky? Like it feels uncomfortable, but maybe you put your finger on it, that acceptable risk there. I do like that, someone mentions the variables to consider. We do everything in our power to mitigate risks, and the expectation is that something technology driven should be less risk. Yeah, that we do have that expectation, but maybe some people have their line is different on that expectation as well. And I think it's smart to flag that material, that self-driving vehicle, to put signs, to put trainings. We can try to mitigate that risk, like we do with a bike. We wear a helmet, right? You wear a seatbelt. We don't put certain apps, or we have restrictions on our phone to mitigate the risk with our kids. So how do we mitigate the risk with AI and self-driving cars? So that's another discussion as well. And I'd love to hear, if you've done some of these discussions with your students, like what are their perceptions? Because our perceptions and our answers to these questions are going to be based on our experiences. Maybe your students look at it differently, or they don't drive, so they see it. And so you might have a wide range of responses based on where people have been. So I'm going to make sure before I go to the next one that the sharing link works, because I'm going to get even more uncomfortable. So I had 3 questions on acceptable risk, and I'm going to go into something that is happening now, and there are policy debates and discussions and all of it. To make sure, I'm just going to copy it now just to make sure that link I sent to Joyce earlier works okay. We're gonna talk about war and death. But think about this: when you know how many crashes happened, when you know the context, do our decisions change? Do we see it a little more nuanced? Do we see it a little more gray? I know just from tech, policies have evolved a lot since the internet came out. I was talking to someone who's been in ed tech for 30 years. You used to have a white list of websites. That was the rule. That was the line back then in like 1995, right? So we evolve and change our policies and guidelines when we sometimes shift our decisions and our ethics around these two. So some of these might shift and change as technology changes as well. So I want to ask you about war, more about war and death. A little uncomfortable. We have AI-enabled drones. They're currently being used. They're developing them quite rapidly. I was reading about one that can be that can be mounted, and then the drone can be lifted off, and they run it on a PlayStation 5 controller. So you got some Raspberry Pis and some game controllers, and they're not actually that hard to use. Drone technology has improved rapidly just with the Russia-Ukraine war. It's used extensively in that war, and there has been a lot of money earmarked to it. The Department of Defense has invested a lot into it. It's not just the US that has invested into it, other countries have as well. So we have drones that are being used to kill people right now. So this is not like a fantasy thing. This is reality, and the technology has improved rapidly. War always pushes technology to move quickly. So I want to talk about this concept to think about what is our level of acceptable risk? How do we feel about this? Now, there are various ways that humans can be involved in this process. Maybe they're the ones that finally press the button. Maybe they just put in the coordinates. Maybe they verify all the targets. Maybe they do it from beginning to end. It can really vary. So in your answer and your thoughts about this question, maybe do you feel comfortable if the human was involved in all steps, or just the firing step, or just the coordinate step? So that kind of gets a little bit gray, but it is just in the last 6 months, some of the drones that are being used in the Russian-Ukraine war are there's cluster drones. So you have someone actually navigating multiple drones with weapons at one time. So these questions will continue to come up as the technology rapidly improves. And where is that line? Where is it? And if you have you're operating 5 to 10, 12 drones at a time, how much can the human be involved? If you're doing this over a long distance, how much can that human be involved? So these are some things to think about in your response. But I want to ask you, how much, if any, human control should be in AI autonomous weapons? And I'm talking a lot about drones, but this can be involved, with missiles, other kind of things as well. So you can click on that Kialu link there. You can see the question, and I want to ask about where is the human in this? What does this look like? And how do you feel? Feel free to just add, how do I feel about this? When I did this question with a group of educators, I remember a comment that was really interesting. It was someone whose family, and close loved ones was in the military. And she was like, this is great. there's so many people have died that I've known, and that if this can protect humans, great. And then there were some responses that are like 0. We shouldn't do it. So a wide range, not a right or wrong answer, but it is interesting. Our backgrounds inform those ethical and those lines there. So can you access it okay? That link, I put it in there. Oh, you need a new link? Oh, sorry, I thought the sharing was enabled. I'll put it right in. This should be fine right here. See if that one works. And I want to get your sense of the human control in war. Okay, so, and if you want to put a caveat on it, like they can be involved in this piece, but not this piece, or this type of weapon, but not this type of weapon. What is that? You could also make the argument that in some ways, when we use tanks or missiles, we've already been pulling away the human from the war element as well. People being attacked from far, far, far away that you never see their faces. You don't see the white of their eyes. So we have been kind of moving in this direction for some time now as technologies and changed in war, but now we have something else. When I was reading on this, feel free to put your comments on here about some of the war, that some of the trench warfare that used to go on, just like, two sides dug in, shooting at each other with drones and autonomous drones being able to go past the front lines. Sometimes the games of war and the strategies of war will change too. So this can change lots and lots of things. So someone says 100% human control. We can't prevent war, but we can prevent errors in technology use. So yeah, like where's the human in the process? So let's say I'm using a missile that can find its own targets and operate autonomously, and maybe all I need to do is push a button. But do I push a button, and do I need to guide it, and what is my role as a human in that process? So yeah, if that helps answer that a little bit, but that's a good point. We can't sometimes prevent accidents. We can't prevent that level of risk, but what can we control, and what mitigating factors are there? You also run into the complications that one country may decide this is our line. Another country says this is our line, and those lines conflict. And so maybe there's an argument that you shift that line depending on what everyone else is doing. I mean, we do that a lot already, like peer pressure, the feeling we shift to match the social groups. Our lines shift in a social way. Someone says, in my Father's Day, there was so much loss of life because humans were at the front line. So yeah, that's what another educator comment was around military family. Thought that was great. Less loss of life. So I appreciate those comments. You feel free to answer. Just click on that link. This is an uncomfortable one. So we started with just talking about copyright and plagiarism, moved into levels of acceptable risk, and I hope that as we've moved through these questions, that maybe it's spurred some self-reflections, because maybe we can't always control this, but we can educate, we can talk about it, we can try to self-reflect and determine our own ethics. Yeah, someone mentions maybe we can just let the drones battle it out. Maybe we just go back to the Middle Ages. Let's just do a duel and just be done with it. That'd be a little less there. Just a drone duel instead. Say make drones, not war. No, I do appreciate the gallows humor. Sometimes you gotta laugh about all this stuff, especially the trench warfare humor a little bit. But just to zoom out a little bit, feel free to keep commenting. You can have access to the links, and we'll share this recording out to think about your own code of ethics, your own line, examining those, like, I don't know, uncomfortable, icky, weird feelings that we have. If one of these questions made you feel uncomfortable, maybe question, why did it make me feel uncomfortable? And what about that question made me think about this? And then how do we talk about, our own code of ethics and then our students' code of ethics? And what does that look like? And how do we define some of those things? And this concept of ambiguity, we are having to exist in this transitional, liminal, ambiguous state right now. And that is deeply uncomfortable. That is hard for our brains. And sometimes we want to jump to the black and white policy immediately because that feels more comfortable. But sometimes we need to sit. I hope that you can sit with this discomfort a little bit as we look at where your line is and how we talk about ethics to our students as well. This is hard. I hope that you can think about what your line is. And as I said, I presented this before. I got a wide variety of answers. There's not a right or wrong answer, but if you have a reasoning behind it, if you've had some self-reflection, if you've had that process, that answer is more true and real, and maybe a line that you would stick with in the long term. So I really appreciate you being here. Apologize for the technical issues earlier. We'll definitely get this out to all those who attended along with the certificate. But thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing your gallows humor, your questions, your comments, and being here as well. So please keep in touch, and let's all keep working together to figure out our own code of ethics and our own line.